Indian National Congress leader Jairam Ramesh has launched a sharp attack on Prime Minister Narendra Modi, accusing him of maintaining an eerie silence in the face of controversial statements made by U.S. President Donald Trump. Welcome viewers to my channel. Please subscribe, like my video and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next update. In a pointed post on X, Ramesh mocked Modi for transforming into a Mani Baba, a silent monk, whenever Trump publicly makes remarks involving India's foreign or defense policies. Ramesh's comments came after Trump repeatedly claimed that Prime Minister Modi had personally assured him that India would drastically cut back its oil imports from Russia. Trump, during two separate media interactions on October 16 and again on October 20, stated that Modi had agreed to halt purchases of Russian crude as part of a broader effort to tighten international pressure on Moscow. He hailed it as a significant diplomatic victory that demonstrated India's willingness to align with Washington's stance on the Ukraine conflict. The claim sparked swift political and diplomatic backlash in New Delhi. Senior officials within India's Ministry of External Affairs, MEA, categorically denied that any such commitment had been made. The ministry also clarified that there had been no phone conversation between Modi and Trump on October 16, as alleged. MEA spokesperson Randhir Jaiswal further explained that the last official communication between the two leaders took place a week earlier, on October 9. During that call, Modi reportedly congratulated Trump for progress on the U.S.-brokered Gaza peace initiative and discussed ongoing trade talks, with no mention of Russian oil imports or defense operations. In a carefully worded statement, the MEA reaffirmed that India's decisions regarding energy imports are driven entirely by its national interests and the imperative to safeguard Indian consumers from global price shocks. The ministry underscored that India's sourcing strategy remains independent, pragmatic, and focused on ensuring stability in domestic energy markets rather than yielding to external political pressures. Officials also added that details regarding Modi's planned attendance at the upcoming ASEAN summit would be released once logistical arrangements were finalized. However, the latest controversy over Trump's comments threatens to cast a shadow over the anticipated meeting between the two leaders on the sidelines of the ASEAN gathering. What was expected to be a routine diplomatic encounter may now face complications, with political observers warning that the issue could strain bilateral optics. Jairam Ramesh seized upon the controversy to intensify his critique of the Modi government's handling of foreign relations and trade. In his post, he accused Modi of conveniently remaining silent whenever Trump invokes Operation Sindoor, the code name for India's military strikes against Pakistan in May 2025, or when the former U.S. president makes assertions affecting India's sovereignty. Ramesh alleged that Modi's reluctance to publicly clarify or counter Trump's statements reflects a pattern of submissive diplomacy and a lack of transparency in India's external engagements. Adding to his criticism, Ramesh pointed to economic indicators suggesting that India's trade deficit with China has worsened significantly, widening to $54.4 billion between April and September 2025, compared to $49.6 billion during the same period the previous year. This, he argued, exposes the government's inability to effectively manage both foreign trade and strategic partnerships. As the diplomatic dust settles, analysts note that the episode has once again highlighted the fragility of India's balancing act between global powers, particularly as Modi's government seeks to maintain strong ties with both Washington and Moscow while navigating a turbulent international landscape. Meanwhile, opposition leaders like Ramesh continued to use Trump's remarks as ammunition to question Modi's assertiveness on the world stage and his government's credibility in foreign policy matters. The air in New Delhi was thick with political tension and disbelief. Across television screens and social media feeds, a familiar controversy had returned to dominate the national conversation, this time ignited not by India's internal politics, but by words spoken thousands of miles away in Washington. The spark came from U.S. President Donald Trump, who, in his typical brash style, declared to the world that Prime Minister Narendra Modi had personally assured him India would cut down its oil imports from Russia, a move Trump described as a tremendous gesture to increase pressure on Moscow. What followed was a storm of speculation, denials, and political finger-pointing that quickly reached the heart of India's capital. For the opposition, it was a moment ripe with opportunity. Among the first to seize it was Congress leader Jairam Ramesh, a seasoned politician known for his sharp tongue and eloquent attacks on the ruling government. In a pointed message posted on X, Ramesh accused Modi of conveniently losing his voice whenever Trump's remarks touched upon sensitive aspects of India's defense and foreign policies. He mockingly dubbed the Prime Minister, Mani Baba, a silent monk, who, despite his reputation for powerful speeches and tireless self-promotion, suddenly retreats into wordless stillness whenever the former US president invokes India's strategic decisions. Ramesh's words resonated across the political spectrum, striking at a nerve that had long been the subject of quiet murmurs: Modi's tendency to remain silent in the face of controversial international comments involving his leadership. The timing of the criticism was particularly potent. Trump's statements had already caused ripples within diplomatic circles, forcing India's Ministry of External Affairs to scramble into damage control mode. On October 16, Trump told reporters that Modi had assured him of India's commitment to halt purchases of Russian oil, presenting it as evidence of their close cooperation. He repeated the claim 4 days later, on October 20, amplifying the impression that India had bowed to American pressure. The Indian government's response was swift and firm. Senior officials flatly denied the existence of any such understanding, insisting that no conversation took place between Modi and Trump on the dates mentioned. The ministry's spokesperson, Randir Jaiswal, stepped before the press to set the record straight. He clarified that the last time the two leaders spoke was on October 9, when Modi had congratulated Trump on progress related to the Gaza peace initiative and discussed bilateral trade issues. There was no mention of Russian oil or any shift in our energy policy, Jaiswal said, his tone measured but unmistakably defensive. The Mayor went on to reiterate India's long-standing position that its energy sourcing decisions are guided by national interest and aimed at protecting the Indian people from the volatility of global markets. Behind the calm language lay a subtle message: India would not allow itself to be dictated to, not by Washington, not by Moscow, and certainly not by the rhetoric of an American president chasing headlines. Yet for many within the opposition, the silence from Modi himself spoke louder than any official statement. The Prime Minister, usually quick to post a tweet or deliver a televised address on matters of national pride, remained conspicuously quiet. To Jairam Ramesh, this silence was emblematic of a larger issue. He accused Modi of hiding behind the machinery of diplomacy rather than confronting Trump's assertions head-on. Each time Trump talks about stopping Operation Sindoor, or claims India will bend to his will, Modi becomes a Mani Baba, Ramesh wrote, invoking the image of a monk in meditative silence. The phrase, Operation Sindoor, referred to the highly secretive and controversial military strike India had conducted against Pakistan in May 2025, a strike that Modi had proudly celebrated at the time as a demonstration of India's strength. For Trump to repeatedly reference it in his speeches, often twisting its meaning or context, and for Modi to remain mute, was, in Ramesh's view, nothing short of political submission. The controversy over Trump's remarks arrived at a delicate moment. Modi was preparing for the upcoming ASEAN summit, where he and Trump were expected to meet on the sidelines. The two leaders had maintained a cordial relationship in public, with both eager to project an image of mutual respect and shared strategic interests. But now, as the Indian Foreign Ministry worked to contain the fallout from Trump's words, that planned meeting appeared uncertain. Diplomats whispered that the Prime Minister's office was reassessing the optics of a face-to-face engagement that could further fuel domestic criticism. Meanwhile, in the corridors of the opposition, Ramesh's attack was only the beginning of a broader offensive. He linked Trump's statements to what he described as the Modi government's failures in foreign policy and trade. He cited recent data indicating that India's trade deficit with China had ballooned to $54.4 billion between April and September 2025, compared to $49.6 billion during the same period the previous year. The widening gap, he argued, was a direct consequence of the government's misplaced priorities and its inability to protect Indian economic interests even as it claimed to pursue self-reliance. In editorial rooms and television studios, analysts dissected every angle. Some argued that Trump's comments were part of his trademark exaggeration, intended to showcase his influence on the world stage. Others suggested that India's muted response reflected its pragmatic balancing act, trying to maintain good relations with both Washington and Moscow while avoiding overt confrontation. Yet, there was no denying that the optics were uncomfortable. Every time Trump spoke about India, whether it was about oil, trade, or military operations, the Modi government found itself scrambling to clarify, explain, or deny. For Ramesh and the Congress Party, The pattern was clear. Modi's silence, they claimed, was not diplomacy, it was avoidance. The leader who had built his reputation on fiery nationalism and decisive leadership seemed to falter when confronted with Trump's unpredictable rhetoric. The opposition framed this as a betrayal of India's image as an independent power, suggesting that Modi was more concerned about maintaining personal ties with global strongmen than standing up for India's